What is up? I am here at Great Lakes E-Bikes today to talk about the new Adventure from Aventon. We have both the step-through model and the straight bar model, and we have the 1 and 2 of each bike to go through what changed. Is it worth upgrading if you already have the 1? Do you want to get to the 2? Or if you're shopping around, you're probably seeing some deals right now to get the 1 for maybe a couple $100 cheaper than the 2. So is it worth maybe upgrading to the 2? We're going to talk about all that today, the pros and cons of sticking with each one, and what I like and don't like about the new upgrades they've done here. So let's take a look. So before we go over like the actual details here, I just want to show you the overall frame design. So we definitely have some new colors that look great. This blue camera doesn't show it off well enough because it looks great in person. It's actually more of a matte finish than how sparkly it looks here. And with this gray branding on it, it looks really good. Small upgrades too, like a rack that comes with it now versus this one does not, the older Adventure. And we'll get into more of what does and doesn't come on the old one and the new one. But you could just see how they definitely kept the same frame design overall. It looks really close with maybe minor tweaks. So you're really getting the same bike, but there's definitely upgrades when you go to the 2. The most notable one that we should talk about, and we'll get to it shortly, is the torque sensor. That's why so many people are gravitating or wanting to learn more about the 2. So we'll talk about the pros and cons of the torque versus the older cadence sensor. Okay, so I think the best way to display the difference is to show the straight bar versus the other straight bar here. We got a quick look at that blue color because I had to show you that, but we're just going to start from the back and work our way up. So I'm going to turn them both on. So to do that remains the same. You just push the battery on and then you hold the power button. I guess you gotta make sure you actually hit the battery first. There you go. You'll notice one small change while we're up here is gonna be the throttle is a different throttle. And the button placement, the power button's now in the middle, where when we go to the older model, you still push the battery on first, but you actually push the power button here. And frankly, this is a little bit of a cheaper, worse throttle button here. So, like I said, we're going to work our way to the back because we actually have 2 rear lights here that also include blinkers. So these are blinkers where on the older one, you just have one rear brake light and it's going to be right here. To activate the brake lights, we're just gonna hit this arrow button, and you can see it's actually quite bright, and I think they did a good job integrating it here versus into a bike rack versus behind the seat. It looks pretty good down here, and it's bright enough to get everyone's attention. We'll just tap that again one more time to turn it off. There we go. And as I mentioned, yes, it does now come with what I'd say is a pretty nice 55-pound max rear rack. So that's another pretty good plus. These sell usually for like $40 or $50, so that's now worked into the price, which it probably should have been to begin with. Now, another thing is we have a Sierra derailleur on this guy where we have the Atlas here. And honestly, they're very similar. But this Atlas does actually look a little bit beefier, a little bit nicer. I think technically it's also a step up too. So that's pretty nice, especially if you're taking this off-road and it's being more of a actual mountain bike. You have something a little beefier, and you can't complain about this. This is actually a derailleur protector that's only on the new Adventure.2. So if you do fall, you're hitting a tree or something, or you're going through some brush, and then you get your whole derailleur, out of whack. That's not gonna happen because this thing is thick. It's a real beefy derailleur protector. Now, as for motor and riding, it really is the same. It's not worth getting into that maybe for another video. Even things like the water bottle mounts are the same. The frame's very much similar. Now, the rack mounting points is probably the only different. You've probably heard nightmare stories of this plastic clip to hold the fender. and putting the rear rack on with this is kind of a pain, where now they've made a new piece of the frame that actually is going to be a lot nicer and hold up over time, where these things cracked like crazy. So yep, seats the same. The overall fenders are the same. It's just the way they mount is different. But the real changes get up into the cockpit. So the first thing we'll look at is the brakes. We have still keeping the hydraulic mineral oil brakes, but these are going to be branded Tektro brakes, where we have these off-brand Zooms on the older model. Now, these performed just fine, and I actually liked them, but Tektro are going to be nicer. They're going to be name brand, again, making it a competitor with other mountain bikes. That leads us right into the fork, where we also had the Zoom branded fork on the older Aventon, but this one is honestly probably the exact same fork at the end of the day, but they've removed the branding and it's just now a blank fork that says Aventon. So it's probably the same, but technically, I'm not going to say anything because they perform the exact same. It's not worth getting into the pickiness here, but I did like the Zoom one on this, so I'm hoping this one is also going to be just fine. This one is missing the lockout. I don't want you to think that it's different. It is the same. It's just this one fell off. As I mentioned earlier, there is some changes up here too. So it's worth mentioning that the way that it does pedal assist is different. So we have, it starts at, well, let's start at the old one actually, where it starts at 0 for the pedal assist and you can go all the way up to 5. Now they've switched things up, and now you actually start at off, and when you go up, it goes eco, and then it goes to tour, then you're in sport, and then if you're like me, you're hanging out in turbo mode, which does sound pretty cool, but it's also a little cheesy. I don't know. I guess I prefer the numbers, but I can't knock them for trying something new. It's fun, right? You can't complain. So battery technology is going to remain the same. Another thing is it's no longer a Bafane branded motor here. It looks like it's just an Aventon branded motor. Again, I'm sure it's going to be the same exact quality. They only have upgraded on the new bike, so you're not going to lose anything. And then the grand finale, of course, is the torque sensor. Is that worth upgrading versus everything we said? For some people, I would say yes. So I have officially, here, I'll switch the camera over. So my final thoughts here are on the torque sensor, because at the end of the day, the riding experience is so similar. Again, you're getting nicer stuff on this thing, and it is worth upgrading, I'd say, just to future-proof yourself. But if you find a great deal on this thing, you can't go wrong with the old Adventure. It's still a solid bike. We're still selling them like crazy here at Great Lakes E-Bikes. So my final thoughts come down to riding both the older cadence sensor and trying out the torque sensor. And it's so hard to explain without you actually trying it yourself. But at the end of the day, I like the torque sensor because it really gets back to feeling like riding a bike. Maybe if you're used to a mid-drive e-bike, it performs a lot like those. So it's a way to get some of the power, fun, torquiness of a hub motor with the feeling of a real bike and the feeling of kind of a mid-drive or older style bike. So when you give it more power, it's actually sending more power to the motor, which is fun, especially at high speeds when you're really giving it. It makes for a more better riding experience. But the cadence sensor is going to be better if you don't really care about that stuff and you just want a bike that's actually going to give you some power. So the cadence sensor, when you pedal, it doesn't matter how hard you're pedaling, it's going to give the same amount of power. So that's why it's technically worse. It's not as high tech, but it still performs pretty similarly, and it's still just as fun because you do have the 5 levels still. So at the end of the day, it comes down to your personal preference. Anyways, I think I'm going to wrap it up here. You can't go wrong with any of the Adventures, but the new ones are pretty cool. So be sure to come here and you can test ride all 4 of them, all 4 styles, and see what one you like the best. So I'm going to end it here. Thank you guys for watching. I'll see you soon.